There are so many people out there really looking for a way to understand their psychosis and their self. But whoever wants to understand their psychosis, or did understand it as I did, after 5 episodes at the age of 42, and thus got rid of it 48 years ago, still has to find the necessary insights for that, all by themselves, even today. Therefore, and in order to fight biological psychiatry with its utter lack of talking with patients, we started the psychosis seminars together with Dr. Thomas Buck at the Hamburg University Clinic, Department of Psychiatry, in the winter semester of 1989-90. We conceived them as an opportunity to exchange experiences between us users of psychiatry, family members, relatives, and professionals, and called this trialogue. Here people who have experienced psychoses can talk freely about their deepest experiences without having to take even more medication, as would be the case in psychiatric institutions. This kind of exchanging of experiences with equal rights for all makes it possible to understand each other a lot better. In the 17 years of their existence, the psychosis seminars spread to Switzerland and Austria as well. Unfortunately, far too few psychiatrists are taking part in them. What is a psychosis? The problem of coercion and violence primarily depends on this definition. The medical concept of the sense and meaningless, genetically caused disorder of the brain metabolism devalues the patient, ignores him as a person with his experiences, and virtually provokes his resistance. What would be the consequences if it weren't you, psychiatrists, who had the power of definition, but if that power was ours? We would define psychosis as an emergence of something that is normally unconscious, in order to solve a previous life crisis which we hadn't been able to solve with our conscious capabilities. We would also say that this was the reason for the similarities between the common schizophrenic symptoms and the events that happen in our nightly dreams, because both come from our subconscious. A symptom of schizophrenia is, for example, the emergence of symbols, thinking and acting in symbolic terms. Our nightly dreams are full of symbols. Or the fact that identifications with Jesus and other personalities can often be found in schizophrenic episodes. In our nightly dreams, we also identify ourselves with the people in them because they often have a lot to do with ourselves personally. And the same is true with the frequent occurrence of delusions about relationships and meanings in schizophrenia. We are able to understand certain contexts of meanings only in the condition of an altered sense of the world, which we attain in the psychosis and which we don't feel otherwise. The same applies to dreams. In an outline of psychoanalysis, Sigmund Freud mentioned, as regards to dreams, quote, a conspicuous tendency to condense, a tendency to create new entities from elements that in our waking hours we would be sure to keep separate from one another, unquote. Consequently, the illness consists in the fact that we consider our psychotic experiences real. If we recognize them as relating to a dream level from the outset, we would not be ill. Therefore, we need to shift the contents of our psychosis to the dream level to be able to maintain the meaning of our psychosis, but not the objective reality. Our psychoses are often accompanied by emerging impulses and emotions, which also come from our subconscious. I act on these impulses or listen to the inner unheard voice to prevent these impulses and feelings from getting bottled up. Some people do hear the voices. This definition of schizophrenia is not debasing and invites people to deal with the contents of the psychosis and the previous life crisis in order to understand oneself better and to know how to handle oneself. We experience and regard the emerging of the subconscious as insertions coming from outside ourselves. Therefore, the English psychiatrist John K. Wing refers to the experience of thought insertion as the central schizophrenic symptom. It is probably this experience of thoughts inserted from the outside that provides the basis for the term schizophrenia. As soon as we realize that we are dealing with an emerging of our subconscious, which we experience and appreciate as coming from outside ourselves because of the completely different kind of thinking and imagining, which is more like being thought, then we can work together towards an understanding of the psychosis and of the self. The fact that our psychoses are caused psychologically by preceding crises in our lives is known to nearly all who have had these experiences. Many people are afraid of psychiatric institutions with their forced medication and complete lack of help to understand either the psychosis or the self. From their very first contact with a patient onwards, psychiatrists should prove themselves to be helpers and not opponents. My wish would be that the patients could, right from the start, present their disturbing experiences in group sessions, that they could talk about them, write about them, paint and draw them, that they would be taken seriously with their experiences without needing to fear unwanted psychiatric interventions. During this process, it would be very valuable to have the aid of those who have experienced psychoses and have overcome them and have understood their meaning for their lives and have been able to integrate them into their normal lives. Just now, at the University Clinic Hamburg Department of Psychiatry, there is a pilot project called Experienced Involvement, XN, which is being sponsored by the European Leonardo da Vinci program, and here people who have overcome their psychoses are being trained to do this kind of work and to help others. You can find further details in the February 2007 edition of the journal Eppendorfer under the title From Patient to Professional, a European project qualifies ex-users of psychiatry to help other patients. I experienced 5 different psychiatric hospitals from 1936 to 1959, with 25 psychiatric professors, medical directors, senior physicians, and their assistants. They all subscribe to the genetically caused, meaningless, and incurable schizophrenia. As a result, I didn't experience a single conversation about the content of my psychoses or the life crisis that led to them, and certainly not about connections in their meanings. Psychiatric inpatients today also complain about this lack of conversation. I was encouraged by the publicist Hans Krieger. In committed reviews of psychiatric and psychological literature in Die Zeit, a weekly newspaper, in the 1960s and 70s, he called for a more considerate kind of treatment of psychotic patients and introduced us to foreign reform initiatives, such as Ronald Lang's Kingsley Hall and others. It is him I have to thank for urging me to write about my experiences of psychosis and healing. In 1990, he and List published it under the title On the Trail of the Morning Star, Psychosis as Self-Discovery. Presently, the book is published by Paranas. Just so you can see that I really had schizophrenia. For according to Kraepelin, healed schizophrenics had never had schizophrenia. How, though, can we trust a psychiatric system that rejects the concept of healing because it contradicts the theory of the senseless, incurable, metabolic brain disorder? We older people who have experienced psychosis have paid for this genetic somatic dogma with forced sterilization and the consequences thereof, and the euthanasia victims paid for it with their lives. Now is the time for the psychiatric system to become an empirical science based on the experiences of patients.
Das muss gut sein.